can't hear me anyways. Now you can hear me. So there we go. So hello everybody. How's everybody doing today? Sorry for the delay. So if you are watching me on Zoom, you can put your questions in the chat box on Zoom. And if you're watching me on YouTube, you can put them in the chat box on YouTube. And either way, I'll be happy to answer your questions. So let's get started with what we've got today. So anyways, can't wait to get started with being able to answer all of your questions, everything else that's going on. So let's get going on a late Wednesday afternoon. I don't know where you're watching, but late Wednesday afternoon here in California. So let's go. So we've got a few questions already. So as I said, if you have questions, if you're watching me on Zoom, put them in the chat box on Zoom. And if you're watching on YouTube, put them in the chat box on YouTube. Either way, I'll be happy to answer them for you. So here we go. Question number one. My question is where to find pre-revenue investors / angels? Lots of websites try and charge for access to the investors, but are there some direct access tips? Okay, well, number one is I would not pay for access to investors. I think that is usually going to be a waste of money. Before I directly answer the question, let me tell you, the challenge when we are looking for investors and we are looking for investors and we are pre-revenue is usually we're not ready. There are some exceptions to this, which I'll be happy to talk about, but let's start with the particulars. So if we're talking, let's break up investors into classes of investors first, probably the easiest way to do it. There are probably three classes of investors. The first class is friends, family, co-founders, and you. That's usually how companies get started, is that group of investors is the group that usually, funds our company at the beginning. So we got to look for those people, friends, family, co-founders, and ourselves. Those are usually the initial money that comes into a company. The next group would be angel investors, maybe family offices. And angels are typically wealthy individuals in and around your industry. These are people that will be interested in sometimes working with you in the business. And their requirements, each level we go up in this, 1, 2, 3 on these levels, the requirements get harder and harder. So typically angels sometimes will get involved pre-revenue, sometimes will get involved early revenue, but sometimes you have to have something usually before they'll get involved in many cases. So the more you have in terms of product, customers, revenue, the easier it is to find investors. Then we get to the third group of investors, which would be various flavors of venture capitalists. And for venture capitalists, if a venture capitalist is going to get involved with your company, they're typically going to want, in most cases, they're going to want traction. And the more money you're trying to raise, the more traction that they're going to require. And traction means revenue. So real revenue. So it's difficult in terms of the question that's being asked, or it's difficult to get these investors to give you money early on in what we're doing. So having said that, let me answer the question, which was, where do I find these investors? Well, you can find lists of investors. And the easiest way to find this list of investors, this is my recommendation, is use crunchbase.com. That's the best source, the easiest source for investors is crunchbase.com. That's the one that will give you the most likelihood of success. You can go to crunchbase.com. They have a free trial for maybe 14 days or a month. I can't remember which. And you can sort by various things that you're looking for, and you can find investors. And then it's up to you. You have to reach out to investors. I have a video on this in terms of how to reach out to and cold email investors. Usually the best way is if you have people that you already know or somebody that you know who can make an introduction. But if we don't have that, Then we've got a cold email, and cold emails do work. The success rate's obviously going to be lower, but they do work. And I have a whole framework for how to do this and how do we get to investors and all that type of stuff. So that's your answer in terms of how do you do this. My favorite tool would be crunchbase.com. Okay, next question. If you have questions for me, please put them in the chat box on either YouTube or on Zoom, depending upon where you're watching me today. Okay, the next question. My previous numbers in the last 2 years have been decreasing because I have not pivoted to the latest trend. Again, I want to go from one industry to another industry. I insist that my previous numbers and business models are in no way a reflection of the future and potential. Yet some smart corporate C-level employees, not investors, but friends in Fortune 500 companies, don't seem to understand that, and they will not be investing in the previous business model. Okay, so what do you do in this particular situation? You know, if you're in this situation and people don't want to invest, well, you've got to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, you know, and why the adjustment in market is the correct adjustment for you to make. So how would we do that? We would do that by explaining the potential, explaining why we've made the adjustment. That's fine. I mean, people make quote unquote pivots all the time and adjustments all the time in our business. In fact, I would argue that every company out there makes some sort of pivot or some sort of adjustment. Every one of us does. So you have to go explain this and sell people that your new vision is the right vision for your business. You have to explain, we found the problem. We are getting traction in this particular market as we're adjusting, and so forth and so on. It's very difficult if the idea is to convince people before you pivot to pay for your pivot. That's a difficult one to do. It's really difficult to do. So I don't know whether that's going to work. So you have to pivot, show progress with the pivot. And if the pivot is working, that's how you get people to invest. If you're asking people to invest before you pivot, that's going to be a tougher one to do, unless, again, you have some sort of track record for success. Okay, I hope that helps. The next question we have, by the way, if you have questions for me on Zoom, put them in the chat box on Zoom. If you have questions for me on YouTube, put them in the chat box on YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer them for you on either platform. Next question. I've been reading Guy Raz's book, How I Built This, about taking $10,000 checks from 10 people in one of his interviews with an entrepreneur. How does one give equity to 10 people initially? Something like a convertible note in a case of a second round of funding works? Question mark. Well, convertible notes are great. Y Combinator probably the best tool out there for this. You can go to their website. It's what's called a safe note. Nice thing about a safe note, it is really an equity note. It is in no way debt that converts to equity. It's simple, easy to do, easy to set up. And for most people know it. Now, having said that, if we're trying to get $10,000 checks out of 10 people, and we have a non-sophisticated group of investors, in other words, people that don't invest for a living, maybe it's your friends, family, co-founders, and yourself for the beginning. And if we have this group of people, they probably aren't going to be very sophisticated. So they're not going to understand some concept like a safe note. So what would I do in this case? I would set a price. So let's say in this particular case, the person's saying $10,000, $10,000, $100,000, probably going to give up 10% of the company, let's say. So that gives you a post-money valuation of $1 million, which means, guess what? These 10 people are each going to end up with 1% of the company for their $10,000. So they would get one. So you add it up, adds up to 10%. That's what they would get. And that's the simplest way to do this. Final point on all of these types of things when we're giving out equity to people, regardless of whether it is sophisticated investors or new investors who've never invested before. Get a lawyer to help you so you do this right and you don't make mistakes. Lawyers who've been through this before, have done startups before, are really, really, really helpful when we're dealing with this type of stuff. Okay. All right. I think that's that group of questions. So if you have questions for me, please put them in the chat box or in the Q&A box if you're watching me on Zoom. And if you're watching me on YouTube, please put them in the chat box. And I will make a pitch as well at this point in time. If you want better answers, more detailed answers, you want to talk to me directly, and you want to really grow your business faster, and you want to go and be in a community of people that are helpful to you and are going to be able to go faster, there are two options for you. The first is I have a free community, Zero to Pitch. You can join it. There's a link below this video for that. If you like the free community, go to my paid community, Zero to Pitch Gold, where we have daily office hours and we review everything from pitch decks to businesses, talk about issues ranging from how do I finance my company to stock option plans, what's the right equity package, how much is it going to cost me? You name the question, we answer it and we deal with it in that community there. So it's a great way to be able to move fast, and it's an absolute bargain, I will tell you, at $99 a month. Or if you want to spend $900, you can get a yearly package with me. And with that, you get 1 hour one-on-one with me in a one-on-one meeting, and that costs $2,000 usually. So 2,000 US dollars for 1 hour of my time. You get that for free if you join Zero to Pitch Gold and take the yearly package. Okay, with that, let's go to the questions that we have here. If you have questions again for me in Zoom or YouTube, put them in the chat box and I'll be happy to answer them for you. So the first question we have, what are the best banks for startups? Well, it depends where you are in the world. Here in the United States, even though they've had a little bit of bad publicity, they're still around. I would say Silicon Valley Bank is my favorite of all the banks. They are very startup friendly. And the thing is, if you're going to do banking, if we're talking about banks, I'm thinking about loans. So if we're going to get a loan from a bank, you want a bank that's quote unquote startup friendly. What does that mean? Startup friendly means that the bank isn't going to call the loan if you miss a payment, which happens. They will work with you. Now there's a price for them working with you, but they will work with you. They won't call the loan, usually. So they would be my favorite. My second favorite would be Comerica. Those are the two that I think of who are really good banks to work with as startups. The rest of the world, I know Silicon Valley Bank has a worldwide presence, so you can look at them as well. One of the other things that I would recommend, since we're on the subject of banking, is you want a good controller to work with you. So a good controller, and this does not mean that you have to hire somebody full-time, especially at the beginning. However, a good controller can be a part-time person, maybe even a day a week, but this person will have relationships with banks. That's one of the questions you should be asking. They will know how to set up your bank account for you. They'll have the relationships with the banks. And that can be really helpful, especially when you need a loan or if you need a loan. And a good controller will recognize you're going to need a loan before you do. Great thing to have. If you have questions for me, put them in the chat box in either Zoom or YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Okay, somebody says, I have a meeting with an investor next week. Congratulations. Glad to hear it. Next question. What are some skills I should learn before I start my startup? I don't have any credentials. I don't know what credentials means. The skills you're going to need are going to be related to whatever your business is. So it's a pretty broad question you're asking. I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question, but that's what I think of is, okay, great. You You have some skills, you need skills. So what are the skills going to be? Well, you need to be able to run a business. That's number one. You need to know how to manage people. That's number two. You need to be able to recruit. That's number three. And by the way, this is in no particular order. So you're going to have to be able to sell. That's number four. We got to be able, every CEO has to be able to sell. I don't care whether you're an engineer that's never sold before in your life, you've got to be able to sell. And it doesn't mean you're a natural salesperson, by the way, either. It just means it means that you get out there, you get in front of customers and you start selling. You have to be able to build your product, whatever that product or service is. Those are the things that I think of. Okay, more questions for me. Put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube. And I'll be happy to answer them for you. How about Brex? I don't know what that is. Maybe you want to give me more information on what you're asking. How about Brex? Nope, can't say that I know that one. Okay, so if you have questions for me, please put them in the chat box or the Q&A box on Zoom or YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer them for you there. Okay, let's see what we've got. All right, so do I need to show my financials to investors? Okay, that's a really good question. I would put this in the it depends thing. Okay, the person goes on to say, okay, this is good. This is really helpful. I am meeting with an investor for the first time and I'm meeting with a principal. What should I do? Okay, this is a great question. So, first of all, the titles that investors have are really important because it tells us who we're meeting with. So if we're meeting with a principal, I'm going to give you three different titles here: a principal, a vice president, or an associate. All literally mean typically the exact same thing depending upon the venture fund that you're dealing with. These are kind of the worker bees of the fund. They are the people that source deals. They typically have no power in the investment process. They don't get to sit there and write checks to people. That's the partners who do that, or the managing directors, depending upon what the venture fund is, how the venture fund is set up. So if we're dealing with a principal, that means that this person is sourcing a deal for the partner that this principal is working for. So do you need to show the financials to a principal in a first meeting? Probably not. So you can hold that back if you want, or you're uncomfortable doing it. That's probably fine. Don't worry about it. The key is you got to still sell the principal on how great your idea is and what your company's doing. And that principal, hopefully, because this principal is essentially operating as a gatekeeper, will recommend to the partner that, hey, this is a really exciting idea. You should meet with this person. So that's what we're going to get when we meet with a principal. So understand, different investors, different titles. These are all important things when we're meeting with people. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, the next question that we have. What are some slides I should learn before I start my startup? Okay. I don't have any credentials. Okay. I see. What are some slides I should learn? Well, download my free pitch deck template. It's literally attached to every single video I do. Click on the link and you will get a copy of my free pitch deck template. It has all the slides you need to develop an awesome pitch deck. I feel like I'm going through one of my videos. But the point is, a pitch deck in today's world is literally your business plan. So I would strongly recommend that you kind of understand what you're going to do. And a pitch deck's a great way to do it. And if you're going to be starting a company, this is your plan, is your deck, essentially. So make use of it. And if you don't know what to do, this is going to help you learn what to do. And it'll give you kind of an idea of what to do. So anyways, that's what I would do. Go through that pitch deck template and fill in all those slides there and learn them, because this is going to give you kind of an idea of what you're going to need for your company. I hope that helps. Okay, the next question we have. Which questions should I ask to the first meeting with the investor? And in return, which questions should I be prepared? Okay, well, this goes along with the previous question. If we're meeting with an investor for a first time, we better be prepared to go through our whole pitch deck, every single slide. You should practice it. You should rehearse it multiple times. You should have it nailed. Because I will tell you, I've been in enough investor meetings where I've been on the investor side, where when somebody is unprepared, it's one of the biggest turnoffs that you can have if you're trying to, if you're on the investor side of things. I remember just a quick story on this. I was meeting with a startup that we were very interested in, and the CEO came in and was totally unprepared. And the first thing he did, so he's got his deck open on his computer, and he's kind of rifling around it. And he looks at me and goes, "Oh, here's a slide that might work to start the meeting." I said, "Oh, it's just a killer," in terms of, I knew I was wasting my time. And at the end of the meeting, I looked at him and I said, "Why weren't you prepared?" And his answer was just, it was just like totally condescending, in my humble opinion. He said, "Well, I wasn't sure that this was going to be a good use of my time, so I didn't prepare." So in other words, you're going to waste my time. It's a fait accompli when you do that. So be prepared. Get all your slides done. Again, you can go to any video on YouTube that I have. There is a free pitch deck template. Click on the link. You will get that template. Fill out all the slides, every single one of them, and that will help you. So that's what I would do if I was you. If there are any other questions, please put them in the chat box, and I will be happy to answer them for you. If you have questions for me on Zoom, you can put them in the chat box there, and I will be happy to answer them for you there as well. Either way, it works. So let me know what you got, and I'll be happy to answer the questions for you. Okay, very good. Let's see if we got any more. If we don't, I will give you guys another minute. Smaller than normal this week. I'm not exactly sure why, but smaller than normal. By the way, next week there will be no Ask Me Anything. Maybe that'll incentivize people to ask questions, but due to travel and other things going on, there will not be an Ask Me Anything next week. We'll have one the following week, but not the next week. Okay, I'm going to give you guys another minute, and we'll see. Okay, here's a question that we got. I have several markets to choose from in terms of starting my company. What's the best one to choose? Or what do I do when I'm in this position? Okay, so if you're in this position where you've got multiple markets, sometimes the most obvious market isn't the best market, is one of the things I would tell you. And you have to pick one to start with. You can't typically go after 7 or 8 markets at the start of a company. So you have to choose. Sometimes you have to look at, how do I get this company off the ground? Because it's hard. It's really hard. So we want to look at, how long is it going to take me to get customers? What's the competition going to be? All these various things are going to All these various things are going to come into play. And if I was to recommend a resource to give you a thought process of how to do this, I would recommend the book, The Innovator's Dilemma by the late Clayton Christensen. It's a fantastic book. It goes over this problem completely. Okay, next question we have. Are there any fundraising help companies that are worth using? In my humble opinion, the answer is typically no. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's had success, but most of these people are probably just out there to steal your money. So I would not use them. What I will tell you, and I think people get this 180 degrees backwards. They think this is what I see time and time again, is people think they have a great pitch. It's so obvious what they're doing. If only they could get introductions to investors, all their problems would be solved. And I will tell you about 99 times out of 100, it's the exact reverse. The problem is the pitch probably makes no sense. It's probably horribly done. And even if you got in front of all the A-list investors that you wanted to get in front of, you would fail. So what's my remedy for this? Work on your pitch. Get better at pitching investors. Download the pitch deck template that I have. Join my free group, Zero to Pitch. That will help you. If you want to go even faster and get even better at this, join my paid group, Zero to Pitch Gold, where we literally do pitch reviews just about every day of various flavors and types. There are ways to get better at this. That's the big problem. It is not finding investors. If you have a great idea, truly a great idea, and your pitch is sound, I'm here to tell you what I have seen over and over again is people in that position, you will be able to find investors. You will be able to get meetings. But if you don't have your pitch right, and what I will tell you is the flip side, 99 times out of 100, people do not have their pitches right. Just from experience, get that right. Okay, next question we have. Are investors focused on founders' credentials because they have no confidence in their ability to properly identify market inefficiencies and opportunities? Well, that's an interesting question. The answer is yes and no. Yes, they are focused on founders' credentials, but no, not because investors do not have an ability to properly identify market inefficiencies and opportunities. I think that's what you were asking. No, they've got a great understanding of how to identify market inefficiencies and opportunities. That's what they're in business for, is to do that. They're looking for qualified people to start companies who they believe have the ability to build the company. That's not their job. That's your job as a CEO to go build the company, not theirs. So as an investor, what is an investor interested in? Yes, they are interested in founder credentials. Do they matter in all cases? To various degrees. For example, if I am trying to go after an established industry and you have, like the industry that I spent the majority of my career in, which was semiconductors, and you have no experience, and you're going to tell me that you're going to go disrupt that industry coming out of college, I would probably tell you good luck, because I don't think that's realistic. However, let's say you're starting this is the thing that popped into my head. It was probably going back, 15 years, but let's say you're starting a social media company and you're coming flat out of college. Does experience matter? No, in fact, it may be a disadvantage in that particular case. So credentials don't matter, but you still have to have the idea and you still have to make sense in terms of what you're telling people, or else they, in terms of investors, are not going to buy in. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, next question. I bootstrapped my company for 3 years, up to 15 people on the team. Congratulations. All equity only. Now I want to raise but revenue is low. The potential is high, and the team is world-class. World-class music, AI tech. Am I screwed? No, you're not screwed. It's just it goes back to something I answered earlier. In terms of the amount of money that you're going to be able to raise, that may be dependent upon how much revenue you have. I mean, this is part of the challenge of answering questions in a one-way environment, right? There's a nuance to the question which I don't understand. So market will depend upon this. The opportunity size will depend upon whether investors will invest. You and the quality of team will determine this too. Now, when you say that it's all equity, that's a little odd. If you've been at this for 3 years, people have been working for free for 3 years, and you've got essentially 15 co-founders on hand, which is, it's a large number, but I've seen companies with large numbers of co-founders as well. So whatever, that's really not the issue. And it's also the amount of money that you're trying to raise. So it may be that you have to raise a smaller amount of money, to get the company to the next level of where you want to go. Is somebody going to likely write you a $10 million check tomorrow? Probably not. Might they write you a $100,000 or $500,000 check, depending upon what you're doing? Maybe. These early stages are really tough when we barely have any revenue or whatever's going on. And low, by the way, is, I don't know what you define as low. So that's also part of the challenge here, is there's a lot of variables in this, as you can see. But, the only way we find out, because there's a variance in all these types of things, is by getting out there and talking to investors and seeing if we can get meetings and judging the feedback. For example, if one investor tells you, no, I'm not going to invest, nobody's going to invest, would I stop talking to investors? No. But if the next 5 or 10 do, that's probably a good indication that you're going to have to retrench and change the way that you do things. I hope that answers your question. Next question. Do we have any more questions? Any more questions? Put them in the Zoom chat or the YouTube chat, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. I'm going to drink some water because I've been at this for close to 40 minutes. Okay, next question. I am building a billing engine on top of existing payment gateways, partners in my region. I intend to apply for a payment license down the line. Will this be a conflict of interest? Well, I think your partners will not be it sounds like you're trying to compete with your partners at some point in time. So when that happens, by the way, I think this happens all the time in business, where people will work with people and then they start competing with them. When that happens, yeah, it's going to be a conflict of interest. Will that mean that they'll stop partnering with you? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the partners. It depends on how much of a threat they view you as. So yes, I mean, these are all things you're going to have to figure out how you're going to deal with them. Okay, so this is a follow-up to the question on credentials that somebody asked before, and now this person's asking a follow-up on the importance of credentials and whether investors are too focused on credentials. And the follow-up was, so you don't think investors are over-focused on credentials? No, I don't. And there's a follow-up to this too, which I'll answer in just a second. So no, I don't. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. They're giving you lots of money. They want to know whether or not you have a chance of success, and credentials matter. If you were writing the checks, wouldn't you care about the background and the quality of the people you're dealing with? Of course you would. Now, this, I think there's kind of a leading question here. The next question is by the same person. Do you have a criticism of the venture capital community? Oh yeah, I've got tons of them. Look, venture capitalists, it's just like any industry. There are good venture capitalists, there are bad venture capitalists, and there are mediocre venture capitalists. So you want to deal with the good and the mediocre ones. And by mediocre, I mean the people who write checks. Those are the majority of the people and will support the companies. let's say 60% of all venture capitalists are like that. They're not going to help you. They're just going to write the checks. And if you get that, consider that a win. If you get a great venture capitalist who really provides value beyond that, that's a super win. And that's maybe another 20%. We can argue over what the percentages are, but you get the idea. It's the bottom 20 that you want to avoid, the people that are evil. And there are evil people out there, and I've dealt with them. And they can destroy your company when you deal with them. And they're horrific. They're problematic. They do all sorts of nefarious things, which I really don't want to get into. I've written about it. You can find this on my website, brettjfox.com, if you search for it. And they can cause all sorts of issues and all sorts of problems and absolutely destroy your company. For example, they can withhold funding if they want, and for the wrong reasons. Nothing to do with you. In fact, they can say they don't even want to invest, which is, by the way, not the worst thing that an investor can do. Say, you know what, I don't want to invest anymore. Don't believe in your business. And then because of the way that venture capital works, if you're dealing with an evil venture capitalist, they can say, you know what, I don't want anybody else to invest in this company, and I am going to make sure that doesn't happen. And there are ways that they can make sure it doesn't happen, from blackballing you to lying about you, to there are clauses, change in control clauses in most of the contracts that you have with investors. And if they have the ability to block a round of funding, if you're dealing with an evil VC, they will block the round of funding. So I hope that helps. Okay. Next question. My co-founder owns 55% of the company because he was supposed to be the money guy. $50,000 over 3 years. Now he doesn't contribute anything and never was an employee. How much will this spook investors? Well, that doesn't look too good to me, to be honest with you. If you gave somebody 55% of your company for 30% for $50,000 investment, that's way, way, way too much. And that is going to be a problem because, number one, this person is the majority owner of the company. That's the first problem you have. So you have 55% debt equity, sitting with this person. And you gave up way too much of the company for that. For $55,000, this was earlier, somebody was talking about $100,000, and I was saying maybe you give up 10% of the company for that. So for $55,000, maybe it's 10% too, something like that. If that was true, and you treat this person, by the way, as an investor, not as an employee, so they get the 10%, it's a non-issue. But at 55%, I think it's a big issue, and you're going to have to figure out how to extricate yourself from this. And it may be that what you do is you start over, fold this one and start again. And I hate to say it, but it's a really crappy position. There are ways out of it, but it's going to be difficult and too complicated to go through, and you're going to need a lawyer to help you deal with it. Okay, next question. Is Web 3.0 still fundable? You're asking the wrong person. You want to talk to investors. If you have a great idea for just about any business, yeah, there's a possibility of getting funded. Some businesses are harder than others. Some businesses have fads associated with them, and the investment cycle goes up and down in those businesses. So, if you've got a great idea and you're passionate about it and you want to go for it, go for it. Okay, next question. Should I negotiate by SAFE rather than a convertible note for a better deal? Well, again, there's way too many variables here to understand even whether a SAFE note is the proper instrument. If we're raising money and we're dealing with probably angel investors, then I would recommend a SAFE note. Convertible notes, if you can avoid it, you're better off without the convertible note, at least for smaller rounds of money, because a SAFE note is just a cleaner instrument. It's well known. You can pull examples from the Y Combinator website, and you can essentially use them. And pretty much everybody in the community knows those. if we're dealing, like I said, with friends, family, non-sophisticated investors, then a safe note or a convertible note isn't going to help you. You're going to want to just give them a flat percentage of the company, as I described previously. What are my thoughts on startup accelerators, Y Combinator and the like? Well, let's start with Y Combinator. I think they're fantastic. If you just watch the videos that they put out, Michael Siebel, and the people that are surrounded in that group, most of them are really on point and fantastic. And the people that I know that have participated in their program have nothing but good things to say about them. I think the and the like, as you go beyond them, the quality, buyer beware, right? It's all quality. So if you think they're quality, then great. Y Combinator is great. It's hard to get into, but they're fantastic. It's just all about the quality of the people and whether or not you think you're going to get value from them. Next question. Okay. This person asked, does age and tags, that's why I was pausing, I had to read what tags were, matter for funding, as I am 18 years old and don't have any tags like Stanford or Harvard, etc. Okay, well, if you're 18, again, it depends upon what you're doing. It's all about what you're doing. My semiconductor example, let's say you were trying to start a new semiconductor company for whatever reason in an established industry, whatever that established industry is, to be harder. But if you're a great coder and you've been coding since you were 12 and you're a coding genius and you came up with some brilliant idea in a new market where really experience doesn't matter, then it's not going to matter at all. The related question I get to this all the time is, do I have to come from Stanford or Harvard or wherever, or some Ivy League school to get funding? No. Flat out, no, you do not. I went to University of California, San Diego for my undergrad. I got funded. You do not need that. It's a nice to have. It will help you from a community standpoint because they have great networks, but it is not a guarantee of anything, nor is it a guarantee of success, to go to Harvard or Stanford. There are plenty of failures that came out of those universities. And by the way, not everybody that goes to Harvard and Stanford is a genius. So consider that. Okay, if you have any questions for me, we're running out of time, but anyways, if you have questions for me, if you're watching on Zoom, put them in the chat box on Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube, put them in the chat box on YouTube. And while I'm saying this, if you're interested in learning more, working with me in a more detailed way, hop on over. There's a link to Zero to Pitch, which is my free site for startup CEOs. All you have to do is just fill out, answer a couple questions, and you will be admitted, assuming you are a startup CEO. If you want more and you want to work with me on a more direct basis than that, you can go to Zero to Pitch Gold, which you can get a link from Zero to Pitch on, and work with me directly. I have office hours every day, and rather than it being in a website mode like this, we actually get to talk to each other and we can move forward a lot quicker. Okay, next question we have. As a solo founder, what's the best way to build conviction in potential investors' minds? Okay, well, that's pretty broad. Here's the way I would think about it, just as a starting point. Whether you're a solo founder or you have multiple co-founders, team is everything. And I'm assuming if we're going to be talking with investors, we're trying to build something broader than ourselves. We're going to need more people. And the idea isn't to delay bringing these people on. In other words, if a great person, and I'm just going to make this up, let's say you are a business genius and you need a technical genius to go with your business genius, or vice versa, it doesn't really matter. You should be looking from that person immediately. Don't wait. Keep looking, keep searching. Now, you may not find that person until after you raise money, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But keep looking, keep building out your team, even if it's people that you're going to bring on after you raise money. And if they come on before you raise money, then guess what? You're no longer a solo founder. I have worked with solo founders who've raised large sums of money. And the trick in each case was that they had a team ready to go, and it was just by circumstance that they didn't have co-founders. They had people who wanted to be co-founders, but for whatever reason didn't join in time to become co-founders. And they were able to convince investors, look, I've got this whole team, they're ready to go. It's just me right now. And it's not because I'm trying to hoard the equity or anything else. And that's what allowed them to raise their money. Hope that helps. Any more questions for me? Put them in the chat box on either Zoom or YouTube. Put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube, and I will be happy to answer your questions there. Give you another minute or so. Okay, as I said, next week we will not have an Ask Me Anything because I'm going to be traveling next week, so it's going to be difficult for me to do it. But we'll be back in 2 weeks, and I will do it again in 2 weeks. And I'll be happy to answer all your questions then. Okay. All right. Does not look like we have any other questions. All right. So I think I'm going to call it a day. So anyways, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Take care. And I enjoyed speaking with you today, as always. And we're back at it again in 2 weeks. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.